What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Today we have our second episode in our 15-part draft strategy series this summer. Every single Wednesday we will be doing an in-depth breakdown of different draft strategy topics, so make sure you are subscribed to the channel and click the little bell symbol next to the subscribe button to make sure you're seeing the videos. Some people have said that they are not seeing the video show up on their homepage. Click the bell and it should show up. Last week we talked about how I gathered the data, where I gathered it from, how I cleaned the data, all that stuff. You've already heard that before. If you want to hear it again, I will link that video in the description, but I am not going to go over that in every single one of these videos. So if you missed that or you just want a refresher, you can go to that video or you can just go to the website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com, and I have these in like article form as well. And I believe the in-depth write-down for that is in the running back video. But again, I'm not going to go over exactly how I collected all the data. You guys saw it last week, or you can check in the description. So the answer, or the question, I guess, that we're trying to answer today is, when do championship teams draft their quarterback, and how many do they draft? The results of this part of the draft strategy project were the most surprising to me. I know, you know, everyone knows running back early is optimal. That's not really like a shocking thing. It's really interesting to see how many running backs early, how many is too many, you know, how long can you wait, what value you can get. Like, those things are interesting, but at the end of the day, we still know that running back early is optimal. That's not overly surprising. The results from today were surprising. What is optimal to do at the quarterback position was a little bit surprising to me, and so we're going to talk about what that was, what the findings were, and then what we can kind of learn from it, you know, kind of just discussing why the results are what they are. So first off, when looking at the first quarterback that someone is going to draft, teams have historically performed better when their first quarterback was taken in rounds 5 through 10 with a peak in rounds 6, 7, and 8. Rounds 4 and 11 are pretty neutral outcomes, and by that I mean you're not helping your team all that much, or all that much at all. You're not helping your team if you take a quarterback or your first quarterback in rounds 4 or 11, but you're not hurting your team. You're not doing something where you're like, oh, gotta make that up somewhere else. It's really just a neutral pick. It has pretty much no impact on if your team makes the playoffs, wins the championship. It's just fine to do, not giving you an edge, not hurting you. Now, with that being said, you could look at it a different way and say, well, it's not hurting you, but if we know that those are the 7th and 8th best rounds to take a quarterback in, you kind of are hurting yourself in a sense, because you know there are 6 better rounds to do something in, and you're actively choosing not to do that. So even though long-term it doesn't negatively impact you, choosing to do something that is not optimal still kind of does negatively impact you, at least compared to what you could have been doing. I hope that makes sense. So again, it's not the end of the world if you do those two things, take a quarterback in the 4th or the 11th round. Just know that like there are better rounds to do it, and so why not do that? Now this part makes sense to me. That is not what I was talking about with it being surprising. We've known for years now that obviously you do not take a quarterback in the first 2 rounds. That's a really bad time to take quarterback. Maybe back in the day when we had like the Brady years and the Peyton Manning years, when, you know, there weren't as many mobile quarterbacks, there weren't as many high-end quarterbacks in fantasy, and the cliff was a little bit more there from the high-end guys. At least, you know, historically it still didn't really work out that well. But, you know, when the cliff was at least a little bit there, you could kind of justify it, but no, we know at this point, you're not taking a quarterback in round 1, round 2, unless you expect him to throw for like 6,000 yards and rush for 1,000 yards. It's just not worth it. They're not as valuable as these other players are early on. So we knew that. And we've known for years now that like the 3rd round is fine. Like the first quarterback is probably going to go in the 3rd round every single year, and you're not going to lose your league if you do that. But let's be honest, there are still really, really good running back, wide receiver, and tight end options in the 3rd round. And so for you to choose that quarterback, they pretty much need to be the number 1 overall quarterback by a good margin. And it's still not the best to do that. So rounds 1 through 3, we kind of knew at this point Don't do it. Round 4 has always been that kind of question mark, though. And if you think a few years back when I did the study about success rates, when we went over, well, where is the cliff in success rate? It was always the 5th round. And so even at that point, we could kind of understand, well, if the first 4 rounds are really, really important for hitting on running backs and wide receivers, and then we see a cliff in talent to the 5th round, logically it makes sense to keep going running back and wide receiver in the first 4 rounds and not do quarterback at least until the 5th. So I feel like we could have backed our way into this finding, saying the 5th round is where you should begin looking at the quarterback position. So again, not shocking. Also, I've had a billion people over the years, and especially this season, ask, why is there a cliff in the 5th round at these other positions? Like, we know it's there, right? But why does it happen every year in the 5th round? Just to kind of answer that question, kind of like as an aside, my thinking, at least right now, and I don't have like some analytical, answering as to why it's always the 5th round, but basically my thinking is each team has how many elite players? Like 0 to 3, somewhere in that kind of range. You probably don't have 4 players going that early. And so if you kind of average it out, there are basically just enough elite players each year to fill 4 rounds. And so you're not going to find, like we're pretty good, right? As an industry, we're pretty good at figuring out who's the most likely players to be elite on each team. Who's the best wide receiver, the best running back? It's not that difficult to figure those things out, right? So when we look at the 5th round, that's when we're starting to take guesses. We're like, okay, well, all the starting running backs are gone and all the stud wide receivers are gone. Here's who could be good. And we start taking guesses. We start kind of buying into narratives and hype. And so it makes sense, again, tying it back to quarterback. Well, that's when the first rounds are really good to attack quarterback, when you start getting a little bit away from the elite players. So that's kind of my answering there. But yeah, take your first quarterback in rounds 5 through 10, lean towards rounds 6 through 8. And I like this graphic I posted on the website because it illustrates why 6 through 8 might be best. I think that ADPs are incredibly sharp when we get into August. There will be, differences, especially among different sites have different differences, but there will be things that we disagree with. There will be players who are multiple rounds or at least multiple quarterback spots away from ADP where we just disagree. We think they're better or worse than ADP, but overall, ADPs are pretty sharp in general. And let's be honest, there's very little actually separating a lot of the elite quarterbacks. Of course, if you look at quarterback like 8 and the quarterback 25, there's a good amount separating those two. But if you're looking at the quarterback 6 and the quarterback 10, there's not as much separating them. They're really, really good talents. They're probably on very good offenses. They probably have, a top 3 quarterback well within their range of outcomes. And so because of that, when we look at this range, look at last season. I'm going to put it on the screen now. There's really no correlation between ADP, where they were drafted, and points per game, at least in this range. As long as you're targeting this range in general, you're probably going to hit on a good talent, and you don't need to be the first to do so, because if there's no correlation, why be first? Let other people take quarterback, and then just kind of take who's left. Now, I do think maybe we don't want to be the last, so I don't think it should be like, because it's also risky doing that. I don't think it should be one of those, all right, well, there's, let's say, 12 good quarterbacks. I'm going to take the 12th. Because number one, you risk that's gone, and now you have to take the first of like the back end options, which we know starting to get into rounds 11, 12, 13. It's suboptimal to take your first quarterback in that range. And you're also just like allowing everyone else to take at least who they think is going to be better, and you're just limiting your options. Like I think we're, if you're watching this video when it's released, which will be June 1st. I don't even know exactly what day. It's going to be, late May, early June when it's released. You're paying attention. You're probably pretty good at predicting who's going to be a good quarterback in fantasy. You don't want to limit your options by saying, I have to take whichever one they give me. So in general, wait for a few of those mid ones to go off. Target them in that round 6 through 8 range. There'll still be a few really good options on the board. Take the one that you really like. Now, this next part, I was definitely contemplating not showing you guys because I think It's a beautiful graphic. I've done all the back end work. I've looked at all of the numbers, and I made a graphic that is very, very easy for you guys to consume. I wanted to keep it for our most loyal members, the people who actually subscribe to the website. But honestly, I feel like it's too good to keep behind closed doors. And there's still like a crazy amount of premium content on the website, so I don't think anyone can get mad at me for showing it. So I present to you the quarterback value chart. This shows you the value that you need in order to draft your first quarterback in each respective round. So for example, and for everyone listening on the podcast who cannot see the graphic, go to YouTube, go to the website, you can see it. But for example, if you find yourself in the third round, you need to be getting at least half a round of ADP value in order to make drafting whatever quarterback is in that range. This year, it's probably Josh Allen, in order to make them worthwhile drafting. So in other words, if you just draft them at their ADP, 1 or 2 spots behind their ADP, that is not enough value. It is suboptimal. It is hurting your team in the long run. If you can get more than half a round of value, well, now we're talking. Now it can be better. I still personally think first 3 rounds is a no for me, but the data suggests as long as you get at least half a round, and these are like cutoffs, at least half a round, then it's fine. Now you're providing an edge over the average playoff rate, just making that decision. So again, half a round just means like in a 12-team league, 6 spots behind ADP. If the ADP of Josh Allen is, I want to do something in the third round, 28, as long as you're getting him at 35 or more than half a round of value, you're good to go. That's fine to do. And that's still in the third round. Go me. Also, if you want to wait until the later rounds, you're like, well, all these quarterbacks are coming off the board. I don't like any of these values. Why don't I just wait? I'm going to take my tight end in the middle round. I'm going to take 1 billion running backs, 1 billion wide receivers, all attack quarterback in the later rounds. You can do that. Absolutely. Just know that if you do that and you wait until the 13th round, you need to be taking that quarterback at least 2 rounds after their ADP, or else that decision will come out to hurt you in the long run. So again, this also highlights round 6 through 8. In round 6 through 8, you can actually reach an entire round ahead of ADP and still make the playoffs at an above average rate. Again, for those of you who skipped the first video, didn't feel like looking at the website, this is based on 770,000 teams over the last 7 years, only looking at 1 quarterback leagues. And that is the part that trips me up for the final part of this video. These are all 1 quarterback leagues, and to this point, that makes sense. This is a really good range to target for 1 quarterback leagues. You might not want to wait super long because everyone only has to start 1. But it is actually optimal to draft 2 quarterbacks in a 1 quarterback league, which is upsetting to me and something that I did not expect to see. So why did things work out this way? I have given that question a lot of thought over the last month or so since I wrote and published the article. This study goes back to 2015. So let's take a look at the top 5 to 7 quarterbacks in each season from 2015 until last year and where they were drafted. In 2015, the top 5 quarterbacks were Cam Newton, Tom Brady, Russell Wilson, Blake Bortles, Carson Palmer. And that's not ADP. That's the top 5 quarterbacks in fantasy that year. By ADP, those are the quarterbacks 15, 7, 6, 22 plus. I don't have great data for it, but it was over 22. Probably wasn't really being drafted, Blake Bortles that year. And then 17. In 2016, things were a bit more normal, but Matt Ryan and Kirk Cousins snuck into the top 5, being drafted as a quarterbacks 24 and 14 respectively. In 2017, another normal start, but then Alex Smith, Carson Wentz finished inside the top 5, being drafted as a quarterbacks 22 and 18. And this trend continues every single year. In 2018, we get Mahomes, Matt Ryan, Big Ben. 2019, Lamar Jackson, Jameis Winston. 2020, Josh Allen, Ryan Tannehill. And then last season, Stafford and Burrow to an extent. I would say last season was the one where it wasn't any crazy values, but those guys still performed really, really well and were not taken in the early rounds. Every single year, there have been multiple quarterbacks taken in the later rounds of drafts that end up being extremely valuable, sometimes finishing first overall. You know, that Lamar Jackson year, if you didn't have him, it's tough to win because that was incredible value that everyone got. And when you're thinking about the opportunity cost of taking these late quarterbacks, how high is it really? I mean, the success rate at running back and wide receiver in these later rounds is like 20%. You've got basically a 1 in 5 chance of hitting, and that's just on a start-worthy top like 32 option. That's not great. Most of the time, you end up cutting these players or just waiting for them to break out, and that never happens anyways. At quarterback, we're actually pretty good at picking them, right? We have an insanely good track record. There are absolutely surprises over the years. On that list I mentioned, we did not predict all those breakouts, right? But we predicted Mahomes and Big Ben. I mean, we were all over Lamar Jackson in that breakout year. We said Josh Allen was the next Lamar Jackson in his breakout season. Like, these breakouts don't all just come out of nowhere. Many of you ended up with these players on your teams, and given how valuable it is to hit on those players, you're putting yourself in an incredible spot when you do so. Like, you can either keep the quarterback that you drafted earlier and trade the breakout. You can, keep the breakout and trade the early quarterback. You can keep both of them, stream 2 incredible options. You hold so much power. And if it's not like overly difficult to do so, or at least it's much easier than trying to predict which, handcuff running back is going to happen to get a month where they're starting, maybe we should be thinking a lot more about taking multiple quarterbacks, especially when the numbers back it up. So that is something that I genuinely did not think I would ever say. I thought I would be on 1 quarterback league, only take 1 quarterback for the rest of my life. Like, I just figured that was going to be optimal, but it doesn't seem like that's the case. And when you start thinking about it more, it does actually make sense. I'll say one thing with this. If you're in a league that trims the bench spot, which is what one of my leagues used to do, only giving you like 4 or 5 bench spots, this becomes less and less optimal. If you've only got 4 bench spots, you kind of in a 1 quarterback league like can't take a backup quarterback because you just don't have enough options to like scroll through your skill players. But most of you play in a league with at least 6 bench spots, many of you in 7, some of you with 8. And as you expand that bench, it becomes much, much, much better to go with these numbers and to take multiple quarterbacks. Because of this, and because we're going to be doing this a lot more this season, I analyzed strength of schedule. I looked at Scott Barrett's free strength of schedule numbers. It's fantasypoints.com, really good website. I would check that out. I use those numbers. I put together a list of who the best pairings are for each quarterback. So let's say you started with Joe Burrow. Who are the best quarterbacks in the middle rounds and in the later rounds to pair with Joe Burrow, given when Joe Burrow has like a difficult schedule, when does another quarterback have a really good matchup in their schedule? So I posted that on the website. It gives you 3 high-end options as well as 3 later round options. So I hope that's like really valuable to some of you if you want just like a really quick and very easy way to just look at who you can be pairing together. The round, this is one question I expect in the comment section. The exact round you take that second quarterback is not overly important. I would personally just wait for the best value, right? It's not like, oh, the 13th round's the best spot. As long as you're taking your first quarterback in that like ideally round 6 through 8 range, but anywhere in that 5 through 10 range, it doesn't really matter when that second quarterback comes, as long as you take that second quarterback and you take them at a value. And since you have such a large range to do it, taking them at a value shouldn't be all that difficult to do. Again, I did some of this work for you on the website, just saying you took this guy, all right, here are your options late, best options to put him with. But as long as you're taking a value and ideally not having the exact same bye week, you're going to be good. So that'll do it for this week's draft strategy video. Tomorrow, I'll be doing a breakdown of 2 players. I honestly do not know which it's going to be yet. That's what I have to decide after making this video. We'll break down 2 players, an early round decision between 2 guys. And then Friday, we'll have a top 5 video before Saturday looking at the biggest ADP changers of the last week. That, my friends, is the end of this one. Hope you all did enjoy. If you did, How about hitting the like button? How about subscribing to the channel if you're new here? Thanks for watching.